Rolling.
He's having gasterial.
Rolling.
Keep it rolling. What?
Okay. Hello, hi, and welcome to Queer Peer Reviews. Here we review queer media, good, bad, and ugly. I'm your host, Bruce, and back at it again is my co-host, Justin.
Here at Queer Peer Reviews, we review your favorites and not so favorites of shows, games, and other queer media, and queer characters.
Today, we're going to be doing something a little different. Not a review, but another
List!
Yeah, another top 5 list. This time, we're going to talk about queer representation in Cartoon Network, or I guess because they merged a bit, it's technically Warner Brothers, but
Yeah.
I want to more focus on Cartoon Network because that
Yeah.
was during the time. So we're doing a top 5 queer representation in Cartoon Network shows. So we're going to start off with number 5, the show Clarence, where one of the three of the characters, Jeff, has 2 moms, which I thought was a very interesting touch. I noticed that a lot in other like cartoons where they, to not make it like a subtle way, like some characters have both same-sex parents, two fathers or 2 mothers. So I thought that was and it just happens. You just see the episode and you're like, oh, I didn't notice that. Like Jeff had 2 moms the whole time. I love that the queer representation. It's subtle. There's nothing too crazy absurd about it. It makes it feel more natural.
Yeah.
Another one too, I'll just throw it in there, kind of like a semi-honorable mention for that 5, is that there was a scene where Clarence's mom was like waiting for her date, and then she sees a guy go through the restaurant front door, and she's like, oh, it's a guy. But then he actually meets up with another guy, so you confirm those are 2, they're actually a gay couple, and she's like, oh, that's nice for him. And she says that comment, she's like, oh, that's good for him. And I know, I love that. It was a weird show at first that I was not into it, but more it's like the more you watch it, the more you're like, okay, I'm kind of getting into it. It's a pretty good show to watch, and I'd say to check it out.
Yeah, definitely. Okay. So for up next, we have
Number 4.
The number 4, the juggernaut that we all love and know, Steven Universe.
With a very 50-50 fandom.
Yeah, we're not gonna get into that here. So for number 4, there's Pearl and the Mystery Woman.
That was an episode that there was an episode that revolved a lot more around Pearl seeing this mystery woman that looked a lot like Rose. Mm-hmm. Another gem that Pearl was attracted to, but this mystery girl is a human.
Yeah.
But like I said, she was just like big woman with pink hair, and like that was like Pearl was like so fascinated by, and it becomes this whole like centric thing of like, oh my God, Pearl has a crush on this girl.
Yeah.
And I think Steven's like trying to like find a way to like get them together or something.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's so interesting because over the course of the show, Pearl like deliberately is like not trying to fraternize too much with humans, but especially like men. Like I remember Mayor Dewey had like a crush on her, and like she had no time for him at all. And then this girl, she's like talking to her and like spending time with her. I know. Yeah. It's like she comes around with like what's it called with Greg, the dad, and so like. She finds meaningful relationships in very few humans. So the fact that this mystery woman was so important to her kind of shows a little bit of something going on.
Yeah, and I know a lot of people love that episode because it's like it was just super like gay for what they were doing, and especially like at the end of the episode where it was revealed that, and the thing is Pearl like still like naive to the human world is how everything works. So she's like, she doesn't even know what's going on.
And this is the craziest part because the gems have been around for like thousands of years, but they deliberately tried to stay away from humans. I don't know if it was in an attempt to not become deified by them or like turned into deities or whatever, but like Pearl Pearl has some grasp on like knighthood and like valor and things like that. So it's a very interesting thing. It was very interesting. And I remember in that episode, or maybe it was the episode where she was introduced, the mystery woman, that they were like driving, and there was this joke where she's like, I'm not exactly a citizen, because she's like driving a car and like they get pulled over, And it's funny because they're like aliens that just came from Earth or came to Earth.
So what I mean by that is like, because at the end of the episode, she ends up getting a phone number, but she didn't even know what to do with that phone number.
Yeah, she's like, I don't have a phone.
And in another episode, when we see like Pearl's storage and her like gem, it turns out she has like a wall of like paper slips of a lot of phone numbers from other women. So it's confirmed that like There's
all part of the
there's a
lore.
lot of women that are very attracted to Pearl, and Pearl is like does not know what that is about.
All part of the lore.
It is. It's cute. All right, now on to number 3, Marceline and Princess Bubblegum from Adventure Time.
Yes. Oh my goodness. So I feel like Adventure Time really like changed a lot. Like when it first came out, I don't even remember what year it was, but when it first came out, it really shook up the animation just in general, like over all the platforms, but especially Cartoon Network. And it really set the precedence for what stories, could be told and how what level of depth they would get.
Yeah, and what I love about them is like the way the show is like premised. There's so much like stuff they can just dive into, and I love it, and especially the lore with Marceline and Princess Bubblegum. Mm-hmm. Like we both know that they are like old. Like they're very like Princess Bubblegum was like started off as like this radiated candy.
Yep.
In the post-apocalyptic world, and Marceline was just like this like half human, half like demon in the beginning, and before she got turned to a vampire, so she's like a vampire demon.
Yeah.
And so they've lived through like all like basically the rebuilding of civilization in the world of Wu.
Yeah.
So they have like this very like long term like kind of like a friendship. Like in the beginning of the show, they have like this like not disdain, but they were just like annoyed with each other. Or like more like Princess Bubblegum was annoyed with Marceline in a way. But as we move on forward, it turns out that they had a little bit more going on in the scene, like relationship wise, especially like one of the shirts that Princess Bubblegum has was something that she got from Marceline when Marceline was doing like a concert.
Yeah, there's this deep, because of how long they've existed, there's this, and you see that in the designs. You could argue of Adventure Time can be a little bit not bland, but they're simplistic. And even in this show for kids, like there are these moments of like wait and I don't know what the right word would be, but there's these moments where you can see the depths of the relationship between these two characters who've effectively existed for millennia with almost nothing but each other. Like they've only been able to rely on each other reasonably because like civilizations rise and falls, armies rise and fall, the Lich does all this evil stuff. But like throughout all of it, they can rely on the fact that this other person that they've known exists, and as I would assume, as time went on, they grew to care about each other to a point where I remember everyone thought like, oh, like Finn really likes Bubblegum and like they're gonna get together or something, or like Bubblegum is gonna stay a kid forever, because I remember that happened in the show, and it's like. Yeah. There was never any chance for Finn. When you really think about it, Finn has only been around. How old is he? He's like 14, 13?
Yeah. I'm kind of glad
kind
of glad they pushed that away from that, and
yeah.
And don't forget, they also had the Adventure Time special, and they had one around Princess Bubblegum. That was a great moment, because now we finally have like something focused with them, and I enjoyed that episode.
It was incredible.
Yeah, so that was like they're basically the most like top iconic couples when it comes to like when you first thing you think of a cartoon is them.
And the craziest thing is what that show, but specifically Marceline and Bubblegum went. What was it, Bubbling, right, or whatever? What that went to create, like the sort of space that made for Cartoon Network and by proxy other networks. What that allowed to grow from that, and like Steven Universe is a direct product of that.
Yeah. Number 2, OKKO with Boxman and Professor Venomous. Now, this one, I actually enjoyed it. I binged like the whole show. So what I love about Professor Venomous and Boxman is that Boxman was like originally like the main villain of like the first season, or like the first chunk of the episodes. And then Professor Venomous shows up, and he kind of takes over a bit of the Boxman's like factories of making robots. But what I love is that they both have kind of an attraction to each other. It's like Boxman was attracted to Professor Venomous, and then Professor Venomous is attracted to Boxman, because like there was like a scene where like Boxman is like fighting, and it reveals like he has like muscles, and Professor Venomous is like, oh. So yeah, and Professor Venomous has like this daughter, Fink, and in a way, the relationship with Boxman kind of like grows a bit. It comes to the point where it's like literally just two dads taking care of like their daughter, and I love it. Remember, these are villains, but every time you see them together in like episodes, you just forget about it, and it's like this is just like these two like married dudes.
Yep.
Just like being aggravated with each other, or just I don't know. I love the relationship.
Yeah, no, and it's something I feel like we didn't see as much of. There are a lot of, I'm trying to think off the top of my head. There's a lot, especially in animation again. There are a lot of gay couples, and I hate to say it, but I feel like this is like a real thing. There's this, what's the word? There's this acceptance of like queer women that tends to come first, and then as that becomes more and more normalized and accepted, then you get the more male representation. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? Especially for these two. You know, this is their parents. Their parents. They're respected because Boxman is an engineer, and then Villainous is like a doctor. He does all that stuff. So it's like,
and like I said, he's like the father of OKKO.
Yeah.
And the another thing is kind of a little funny too is like they have visitation. So like while he's the main like the big villain, he's like, oh, but you know you got to be with your father this weekend. It's like, oh, okay. I don't know. It's just it doesn't take itself too much seriously sometimes, and I love it. But yeah, like you mentioned, this is also a big one because like you mentioned, like queer females are usually the first, like, you know, it usually happens first. You don't see much more of like when it comes to like two guys.
Yeah.
So this was like a big one for KKO, and I loved it.
Especially because the show has comedy in it, but it's not played up for laugh. The severity of their relationship with Venomous and Boxman. Again, there are jokes in it that, like, because Boxman is, I don't want to say incompetent, but a lot of times his plans don't come out the way that he wants them to. But the relationship is treated with respect and tact in a way that is just kind of rare.
Well, yeah, while the show's like mostly jokes, that's like they take the relationship seriously, and that's like the good balance.
The other thing that we were talking about actually as well with OKKO specifically is Enid, and her dynamic with, what was her name? Red Ranger. There's like a Power Rangers parody thing going on, and Enid is this ninja witch girl who ends up fighting alongside these Rangers who have a leader who's Red Action. So yeah, there's a dichotomy there of these two girls who, I don't remember exactly how things start because they're both kind of like badasses in their own respects, and they come to respect each other over the course of like fighting missions and all that sort of stuff, and it blossoms from there into something that you could argue is more romantic. Then there's like the timeline stuff too, so it's there's a lot of different things that happen. Just watch the show.
Yeah,
it's good.
And for finally a top number one is back to Steve Universe, Ruby and Sapphire. Specifically Ruby and Sapphire that make one of our most popular characters, Garnet.
Yeah.
But before that, they're actually what happened was, like, we thought Garnet was like this one crystal gem.
Yeah, singular gem.
Which we didn't, for some reason, didn't like catch us off guard, even though she had like two gems. We didn't even think about that.
We didn't know at that point.
Yeah.
That's how that worked.
And then it turns out they're actually two fusions, Ruby and Sapphire, who both identify as females. So in a way, it's a lesbian couple.
Yeah.
And what makes this like number one is that they pulled off something that kind of cost them the show a bit, was when Ruby and Sapphire had a wedding. And it was beautifully well done.
Not only was the marriage incredible, like the marriage ceremony sequence, like the animation, all of it was top tier. But they have songs together. They have, the show Steven Universe itself talks a lot about relationships in general, and there's so many multiple aspects and facets to the relationship. Almost, it's like multifaceted, like a gem. Mm-hmm. And there's so much going on between the two of them, and even as separate entities, they have distinct characteristics and traits, which is something that I feel like a lot of shows, they're like, oh, they're just the couple. They can't exist outside of each other. But there were multiple episodes where they were separated. There were episodes where they were separated of their own will, and when they were separated against their will. And there's so much they talk about how they met, how they found each other, how they were able to overcome adversity, even when their entire society didn't look kindly upon it. Like, there's so much that goes into who Garnet is, and what makes Garnet work, that it's just, it makes Garnet such an incredible character.
But yeah, like I said, we picked that number one because they managed to do a whole queer wedding, which was like the biggest like in like Cartoon Network history for them to do.
Yeah.
And at that point, that's like kind of let out like a higher bar now for like other shows that has been coming out recently. So it was a high moment.
Yeah. The other interesting thing specifically about the wedding episode was that the way that they had coded, because Hays codes, man, they last forever, even when they're not. But they coded Ruby and Sapphire in a very specific way, where you could argue that Ruby was more like mass coded and Sapphire was more feminine coded. But during the wedding ceremony, Sapphire wears a suit and Ruby doesn't. And the interesting thing about that becomes that if somebody wanted to censor that specific episode, they wouldn't really be able to do it, because if they had been trying to argue, and I think this was happening. I think for a while people were trying to say that Ruby was a boy, but in that specific instance, it wouldn't work.
And then Rebecca was like, "Fuck you."
Yeah, there was no way to do that for that specific episode.
And they make Ruby wear the dress.
Yeah,
to confirm. Like, no, they're both.
They didn't make. I don't think they made Ruby made the.
No, but I mean, like they had Ruby wear the dress.
It was a distinctive choice by the creators.
Just to tell you, it's like, no, these are two females.
Yeah, exactly.
So you can't see shit.
Yeah. So no matter how you do it, if they would have to retroactively change the dubbing or whatever from the first couple seasons, or try desperately to make some sense of it in this. So it really came off as like a distinctive message that this is what they are, this is how they are, and you got to accept that, which was incredible to see.
I think that was a pretty good top 5 list for queer representations in Cartoon Network.
Yeah. If you have other thoughts, let us know in the comments. If you have people that you think, or characters you think we forgot, write them down there. We'd love to see what you have to say.
Or any specific, I guess, if you want us to do a Disney or Nickelodeon, let us know in the comments. And that's pretty much it. Remember, we have links down below for the Trevor Project and our social medias, so make sure you subscribe and follow us through all that. Thank you for watching.